Are you troubled by the amount of plastic waste in our environment? And are you also concerned about the amount of food we waste every week? If you are, stay tuned and hear what our guest has to say about aspiring toward a zero-waste lifestyle. Our guest today, Anne-Marie Bono, is a senior editor at a book publishing company. In addition to her day job, she writes a blog on Zero Waste Chef and conducts workshops on this subject. And last but not least, she is the proud parent of 2 daughters. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Grace.
It's so good to have you here today, and I have lots of questions to ask you. First of all, tell us, was there some kind of a catalyst for your interest in environmentalism?
Well, I think it started when I was a teenager, and I helped my dad build a solar thermal panel for our pool.
Oh.
Yeah. My job was to paint rocks black. So we had this giant case he built, and he put PVC coils inside on top of the rocks that I had painted, and pumped water from the pool through the coils back into the pool, and it worked beautifully.
Just how big is our food waste problem?
Well, it's huge. So according to the National Resources Defense Council, the NRDC, we waste 40% of the food we produce in this country.
40%?
Yeah, 40. It's amazing. So we waste not only the food, but all of the resources that went into growing that food. Growing food in the States uses 10% of our energy budget. It uses 50% of our land. Meanwhile, 1 in 6 Americans is food insecure. If we could feed people that wasted food, it would feed 15 million Americans every year.
Why do we as consumers waste so much food?
There are a few reasons. First of all, grocery stores reject a lot of food. They reject ugly produce. So they want all of their fruits and vegetables to be the same size, the same shape, blemish-free. Even bananas have to have a certain angle to their curve, or else they're rejected.
Is all this thrown away?
Some of it's thrown away, just sent to landfill. So it's slowly changing. The past year there's been a lot of awareness about food waste. So there are a few grocery stores that are now selling wonky produce at a discount. And
really?
People they're gobbling it up.
Oh, wonderful. Is that very prevalent, these grocery stores that sell this kind of produce?
I think they're in the minority. It's just getting started.
Just getting started.
Yeah.
Are there any other factors that contribute to food waste?
There are quite a few. So just buying too much food and storing food improperly. So tomatoes, for example, should be stored at room temperature. In the fridge, they lose their flavor, and you're not going to want to eat tomatoes that don't taste good.
Right.
Onions and potatoes should be stored separately and at a cool temperature, because when they're together, they give off gases that cause them to decompose faster.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to remember. Keep them apart, because I've been putting them together.
Nope, keep them apart. We're picky. That's another reason we waste food. So, for example, my friend's son joined the 4-H club recently, and he raised a lamb, and the sheep farmer came and spoke to the group, and he said people only want to eat his lamb chops, so they don't want any other parts of the animal. So, you know, we're picky about our produce in the same way. So that leads to food waste. And another big one is the confusing expiration dates on food. So the FDA doesn't regulate those. The companies just put those on there. They're more of a guideline to when the food is at its peak. So, you know, if you don't open a tub of yogurt before the best by date or best before date or sell by date, it's going to keep for quite a while. So a lot of food gets thrown out because of those confusing expiration dates.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the food has gone bad.
No, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
And in some cases, it's just marketing.
Well, that's good to know, because I have been known to throw away food, at the expiration date. But you're saying that I can actually keep it safely.
Well, depending on the food, give it a sniff.
Right. Use some common sense.
Use some common sense.
And now you're called a zero waste chef. What exactly does zero waste cooking entail?
So I don't produce any packaging waste or any food waste in my kitchen. So I have 3 rules on my blog: nothing processed, no packaging, and no waste. A lot of people say to me, well, you must do a lot of recycling. But I actually don't recycle because I don't buy anything in packaging that requires recycling. I cook everything from scratch.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty daunting task, cooking everything from scratch. How would someone get started with this method of cooking?
Well, it starts with the shopping. So I keep a running list on my phone, a shopping list. When I run out of something, I type it in there. And then when it's time to go shopping, I gather my equipment. So I have jars and these cloth produce bags that I use at the bulk bins to fill up with. That way I don't bring home any waste. I shop a lot at the farmer's market, buy most of my fruit and vegetables at the farmer's market in my produce bags. And so it's not as hard as it sounds.
Well, now you're taking glass jars to the grocery store, you're saying. How does that work? Because glass weighs a lot.
Right. Yeah, people ask me that all the time. So, and stores are all different. Once you start shopping this way, you get a routine down, so I know which stores to go for what. And we're lucky in this area, there are quite a few stores that have good bulk bins. So what I do is I take the jar, and you can take it to customer service. They'll weigh the jar, and then they'll mark the weight on it, and then you fill it, and when you pay for it, the cashier will deduct the weight of the jar.
Are most grocery stores willing to do that?
Let's see, Whole Foods in Los Altos does it. That's the one I shop in. And then there are a couple of really great stores. Rainbow Grocery in San Francisco. I go there, if I'm in San Francisco, I always go stop at Rainbow. And they actually have scales set out around the store, and they encourage you to do this. And you weigh the jar yourself, and you mark it.
Oh, I see. Tell us some more things that we can do to not be so wasteful.
I use everything. So in my kitchen, I don't waste anything. And as I continue to do this, I'm amazed at new things I'm figuring out all the time. So, for example, during the week when I'm cooking, I go through a lot of carrots and onions and celery. And so I'll save all the little bits, and then I'll put them in jars, glass jars, and put them in the freezer. And when I have maybe 2 large jars filled with vegetable scraps, I'll make vegetable broth out of them. And I do the same thing with bones. So we don't eat a lot of meat, so it takes me a little while to amass enough bones. But I just put them in the freezer, and they keep in there. And then when I have enough, I make bone broth. So I haven't bought broth for years. That's another thing. This saves money.
Oh, I bet it does.
And I just wrote a blog post about 10 things you can do with citrus peels.
Oh, tell us a couple of them.
Well, candied citrus peels. They're delicious. They're really good. And I've used those to flavor kombucha. It's a fermented tea. That's really delicious. You can dry them out and cut them up and put them in chai. I've made my own chai, loose leaf chai. You can stuff them in a chicken, to add some orangey flavor. Right. You can zest oranges and lemons, and you can freeze the zest before you use the fruit. Yeah, there are all sorts of things. I could have written more, but try to keep it to 10 or fewer.
What do you do with potato peels? Do you fry them, maybe?
Yeah, you can fry them. Oh, I've done that. It's delicious.
It is.
Fry them. Yeah, fry them with. Well, I've rendered my own lard too.
How do you render your own lard?
Well, it's actually really easy. So I actually should stop telling people this, but my butcher gives me pork fat for free because they just throw it out. And you cut it up and you just put it, I put it in a pan, this is how I do it. Put it in a pan in the oven at low heat, and then it just melts and you're left with this liquid, and you strain it off and you get this perfect lard. So the potato skins are really good.
Are really good in the lard.
But when I eat something like peels or potato peels or orange peels, I only eat organic. I mostly eat organic food anyway, but especially peels, because the pesticides are on the skin.
How do you go about buying things like salt and olive oils?
Some stores sell those in bulk. So salt, I would just take a jar to the store and fill up the jar.
So they have what, a bin full?
Yeah, a bin.
So, I guess I haven't seen those.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Rainbow up in San Francisco they have everything, just about everything you can think of.
How about,
in bulk.
now olive oil goes rancid, if you buy too much at a time. So how would you buy those in bulk? Oils, different kinds of oils?
Well, you can just, you can get small amounts. I cook a lot. I go through a lot of olive oil. So it takes a while.
So you do buy it in a jar?
Yeah, sometimes. My boss, actually, she goes to Napa quite a bit, and there's a really good olive oil it's called Napa Valley Olive Oil Manufactory, I think. So she'll bring me back jugs of it. They come in nice glass jugs. And I'll reuse the jugs for kombucha or ginger beer. Or I'll, if she's not going up there and I'm out, I'll buy it in bulk down here. And
where did you get started with all these zero waste concepts?
Well, it's all started when I started hearing more about all the plastic pollution in the oceans. So there are 5 gyres of swirling plastics in the oceans.
5 of them? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, like 5 massive ones are in each, Atlantic Ocean, Pacific. Yeah, and it's a mess. Animals eat the plastic. Albatross, they feed it, well, not other birds, they feed the plastic to their young, and so they feel full because their stomachs are full, but then they starve. They starve to death and die, and it's pretty horrifying. And so I had been hearing a lot about that, and I thought, I just don't want to be a part of this. And there's got to be a way to stop using all this plastic, but I didn't know where to start. I had banned bottled water at home and hadn't used plastic wrap for years, and my mother always wonders how I manage without plastic wrap. But it was my daughter who found this blog by Beth Terry. It's My Plastic Free Life. And so Mary Catherine is the one who got us started. And so we just started adopting some of the habits that Beth had written about.
And what are some of those habits that she wrote about?
So a lot of it is, well, so first of all, for us, it was, actually, I think for most people, we produced most of our garbage and our plastic waste in the kitchen. It was, a lot of it was food waste. So, so we started shopping differently. We started shopping at the farmer's market more. I had always cooked, but I started cooking everything from scratch. I made my own ketchup, and today I make my own vinegar, and I make my own vanilla.
Oh,
and
that's pretty time-consuming, making everything from scratch, isn't it?
Well, some of it is actually pretty easy. It's a different way of cooking, so I have to plan. I think that's the key. You just have to plan ahead of time what you're going to eat. So, making sour cream is actually really easy. All you do is you take some half and half and you add a spoonful of cultured buttermilk. It has to be cultured buttermilk, not just flavored buttermilk. You stir it up and you wait 24 hours. You leave it at room temperature and you have absolutely delicious sour cream. So, but if you want it right away, then you can't. So, we're used to getting in the car. Okay, I need sour cream. You get in the car, you go to the store, you buy your tub of sour cream, and then you go home. So it just, I think planning is the important part. So it's, And also I cook pretty simple food.
And you bake your own sourdough bread, I understand.
I do. That's one of my favorite things to make.
Ah, and I know that you use wild yeast instead of commercial yeast. Now, what's the advantage of using wild yeast?
There are several advantages. First of all, it's a lot of fun. So I've been baking bread for 20 years. My mother-in-law taught me. She owned a bakery. And I remember at the time, she showed me with commercial yeast, just, you know, Fleischmann's, the stuff that most people bake with. And at the time, she said, but Anne Marie, you know, at the end, she said, a real baker will just use yeast that's in the air. And I thought, that's crazy. Nobody can do that. And I wish I had looked into it, because now I'm doing it. So I started baking sourdough a couple of years ago. And so, you know, there's yeast in the air, there's yeast in the flour, there's yeast on our hands. So you mix together flour and water. And when you add the water, it revives the microbes that are in there. And then you nurture it, and you feed it every day, fresh flour and water, until you have this bubbly starter. So it's this bubbly, yeasty concoction, just like you would, or similar to what you get with Fleischmann's, except it's, you know, it's natural, it's wild. And it's delicious, makes delicious bread.
Does it taste better than the commercial yeast bread?
Oh, well, I think so.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's this hearty, savory, delicious, sour. And the flavor is different depending on where you live. So all real bread is sourdough bread. It's all made with a sourdough starter. But it just, you know, here it has that distinctive flavor.
And you use a bread machine?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
No. My oven is my bread machine.
I see. It's your oven. Very good, very good. So I also understand that you really like fermenting. What kind of foods do you ferment?
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with fermenting. So let's see. I ferment sauerkraut. I make krautchi, which is a cross between sauerkraut and kimchi. Yeah, it's really delicious. I do pickles, salsa, ginger beer, which is, it's fantastic. All it has in it, they're all actually very simple. And all ginger beer has in it is ginger, sugar, and water. I make, so sourdough bread, that's fermented. I've made yogurt, sour cream, creme fraiche, preserved lemons.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's all super delicious. All the expensive stuff is fermented.
What are some of the health benefits of eating fermented foods?
I can talk from my own experience. Since I cleaned up my diet and started eating more fermented food, I rarely get sick. So I try to eat at least one fermented thing every day. And so I think I have a really healthy gut. And so new studies are coming out all the time on the importance of a healthy gut. And this is a great book, The Good Gut. And it's written by two Stanford microbiologists, and so they're local. And, you know, it's just really exciting, all of the research that's coming out on the gut and the importance of a healthy gut. And it's really linked to everything, not just your physical health, but your emotional health. And so it's boosts your immunity, and it affects your mood. There have been studies that suggest that healthy gut reduces your anxiety and depression, and so it's really going to change medicine and human health.
It has a lot more ramifications than we would originally think. And I also understand that you like to do a lot of freezing. Now, how do you go about freezing food without plastic?
So yeah, I wrote a blog post on that recently too, and people really, they loved that. I was surprised how to store food without plastic. So in the freezer, well, I use jars. I use my glass jars. If you want to go zero waste in the kitchen, start hoarding jars now. You'll use them to store food. The nice thing about glass is you can see what's in the jar.
Right.
So, you know, when you use an opaque container in the back of the fridge, you forget what's in there, and then by the time you get to it, it's rotten. So I freeze food in wide-mouth glass jars, and I leave headspace if it's liquid so that, you know, the jars don't break. I've had one bottle break once. I learned quickly.
Oh, really?
Don't freeze liquid in a bottle because, you know, it froze. Even though I left headspace, it froze it, and it you know, moved up and snapped the top clean off. But that's the only problem I've had. With things like fruit, I'll prep them, I'll clean them, you know, clean strawberries, and then spread them on a cookie sheet and put that in the freezer. And then once they're frozen, I'll put them in jars. I freeze roasted tomatoes so that for part of the winter anyway, because I eat them quickly. I'll have frozen tomatoes because I don't buy canned tomatoes. So, I freeze broth, my broth and my scraps that go into the broth. I'll often cook beans, in my crock pot, and then I'll freeze some of those. They're nice to have on hand. You can freeze, like I said, you can freeze lemon zest and orange zest. And my sourdough bread, if I make an extra loaf, I'll freeze it in one of my cloth bags in the freezer.
And it doesn't get
freezer burn?
Freezer burn.
Sourdough bread has a hard crust, and it does well in there. But I could, if I was freezing it in plastic, I could probably leave it in there for months and months, or maybe for a little bit longer. But
so your freezer's full of glass jars.
It has quite a few glass jars in it. So you have to be careful not to put too many in, because, you know, you open it and they come crashing out.
So what has surprised you most about living plastic-free?
When I first started this, it was just because I wanted to stop contributing to the plastic pollution problem in the oceans, and I had no idea it would improve my life, but it has. I'm happier. My life is simpler, and so I have more time to do things I enjoy. I eat way better. I rarely get sick. You know, I had no idea that any of those things would happen. So, and it's a lot of fun.
Is it fun?
It is fun. It's a challenge.
It sounds like it's a lot of work.
Well, I don't know, because I don't spend a lot of time shopping for stuff I don't need, and you know, my life's pretty simple. I do spend a lot of time in the kitchen. I'm obsessed with food, so I think that helps.
I know that you've already said that you don't like to waste anything, right? You like to use everything. You use your vegetable peels, you use your chicken bones, meat bones, and so forth. How about the apple cores and your fruit cores?
So I save those too.
You save those too?
I save those too.
What do you do with apple cores?
So my daughter made apple crumble and an apple tart at Thanksgiving. So we had all of these apple peels and cores, and I make vinegar out of them.
Vinegar?
Yeah, I make scrap vinegar. So it's not quite as strong as cider vinegar, but it's definitely vinegar. It ferments. So I take the fruit and I put it in a jar, and I add water, fill the jar with water, and add a little... Like
apple cores, for instance?
Yeah, put the apple cores and apple peels in the jar.
You put water in the jar?
Yeah, cover them with water, and then add maybe a tablespoon, well, okay, it depends on how many apples. Add a tablespoon of sugar, and just stir it every day. It will turn alcoholic in about a week, and then you let it go longer, and it will turn vinegary. And then I just strain it, and then I have my scrap vinegar, which
really,
yeah, I use for cooking, I use for cleaning. Yeah, it's great, and it's free.
I'm going to have to try that. Thanks for the tip, because I've been throwing away all my cores, all my fruit cores. Now, if people, you know, are really serious about starting to work towards this zero waste lifestyle, what is the best way to get started?
Well, I think the best way to get started is learn to cook. I think when you learn to cook, well, you stop buying processed food, which is, I think, where a lot of the packaging waste comes from, and also you'll waste less food. So I used to follow recipes strictly, and I'd write down all the stuff I would need, and I would buy a lot of special ingredients, and you end up not using those. I mean, you always have a little bit of this left,
right.
a little
That's
bit
true.
of that. But if you really learn how to cook, you method cook instead, and you look in your refrigerator and your pantry, and you see, oh, I have black beans, and oh, I have sweet potatoes. I can make some black bean and sweet potato soup. So soup is a great thing. You can just put anything in it. Yeah, rescue soup.
Now, if people want to make a food resolution for the year, what do you think it should be?
I think a great resolution is cut the processed food.
Okay, that's a good resolution to make. Well, Anne-Marie, our time is up, and thank you so much for coming to visit with us. You've really given us a lot of food for thought.
Well, thanks for having me, Grace.
Thank you. The Better Part is produced by volunteers at the Cupertino Senior Center. Absolutely no experience is required to join the Better Part. If you would like to look into being a part of our group, please leave a message with the Cupertino Senior Center. It's a lot of fun to be part of a TV show, so check us out. And as always, thank you for being with us. And remember to also watch us on YouTube and Roku. See you next time. Bye-bye.